Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video we have my Game Week 16 deadline decisions. This is a weekly series where I take you through your final questions and dilemmas ahead of the upcoming deadline. If you do get any use out of today's video and you enjoy it, please do smash that like button. Make sure to subscribe to the channel as well. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So the major talking point for Game Week 16 and the major decision that a lot of us will have to make is an Mbeumo replacement, because it has been confirmed that after rolling his ankle that the injury was bad, according to Thomas Frank, and that he'll be out for, I think it was some weeks. So even if he's only out for 2 or 3 weeks, I think with blank Game Week 18, with the fact that he's then off to AFCON in Game Week 21, Mbeumo probably is a sell. The only thing that could throw a spanner in the works is there is still a very small chance, a smaller chance by every day that goes past, by the way, that there could be a double game week for Brentford and Man City in Game Week 20, but due to the fact that Game Week 20 is coming around very, very quickly, I think it's more likely that the double will now fall in, I think, 21, 24, or 25. So what that basically means is Mbeumo is injured, has a blank in 18, and is off to AFCON in 21, and probably doesn't have a double, therefore. So Mbeumo is probably a sell, but even if you aren't selling Mbeumo, still a lot of people looking at making midfield transfers. So I've tried to go through the list here and talk about the best replacements objectively, when you take into account data, fixtures, form, whatever you want, eye test. I think there are 4 options that stand out for me, and then I've got some other replacements here. It is worth noting, I still think that obviously Salah, Saka, and Son are better than all of the options here, but they are also significantly more expensive. So if in your case, you've got money in the bank or you're making a set of transfers which allows you to go from Mbeumo to Saka or Son, I think that probably is worth doing. But outside of those two, and obviously Salah, there are 4 main options for me, and that is Palmer, Gordon, Bowen, and Sterling. We've spoken about Palmer and Gordon for weeks and weeks now, and I still find it very, very difficult to split the two of them. I have always just about lent Palmer, and I think I still do for just a couple of reasons. I think the fixtures are slightly better. I think Palmer is cheaper, and that money can be spent elsewhere, maybe upgrading the defence, and we'll talk about more expensive defenders later in the video. And at the time we're recording this, at least, Palmer is still on penalties. Once Nkunku comes back, maybe that'll mix things up. Maybe Enzo will take the odd penalty ahead of him, but as far as we know, Palmer is still first choice for penalties. So for those reasons, I think I still just value Palmer ahead of Gordon, but I do think Gordon has greater open play goal threat. Palmer has the pens, and he does have a bit of goal threat, but from open play, the data would suggest that Gordon is the more likely one to return, and I don't think there's a lot to split the two of them. So if you've already got Palmer, or you just don't fancy him an option, you don't think you fancy Chelsea moving forward, even with their nice fixtures to score many goals, I have no issue with Gordon. I may well do it, but at the moment, I am favouring Palmer. Bowen and Sterling, not quite as good as Palmer and Gordon for me, especially once you take into account price as well. Obviously, Bowen up there, I think 7.6 million. He did score tonight. I'm recording this after the Spurs versus West Ham game, and he looked pretty good. And West Ham actually looked decent as well. And I think a lot of us may be not considering Bowen because we've just sold him. And sometimes when you just sell a player, you've almost got to like suppress your ego and just accept that buying them back now is a completely different transaction and transfer. That selling them was one thing, and buying them back is a completely different thing, especially when you take into account the injury too. So I actually like Jarrod Bowen. I would say that, well, I've pretty much listed these best replacements in order. I think Palmer is still the best, especially taking into account penalties, price, fixtures, etc. I do like Gordon as a second best, and Bowen is a close third for me. And I am considering Bowen because a lot of people won't be able to move to Bowen due to budget, because of course he is more expensive than Mbeumo, and a lot of people just have the money that they have available in that spot. So I do really like Bowen, and Sterling is still up there for me because he is very explosive. He tends to do very well against sort of lower teams lower down in the league. We saw it earlier on in the season as well. And I think he's the sort of player that could give you a massive rank jump just because he can go out there and get a 15+ pointer. My only concerns around Sterling is his data isn't as good as Palmer's, and yet he's over £1.5 million more expensive. He's not on penalties, he's not on set pieces, and he's also on 4 yellows. And I think, am I just trying to be too clever by going for Sterling over Palmer? Like, what is the reason I'm going for Sterling over Palmer? There isn't really one, other than the fact that historically Raheem Sterling has scored a lot of goals, but most of those came for Man City. So I like Sterling, but I do wonder if it's a case of trying to be too clever. But those 4, I think, are all fantastic replacements for Mbeumo. Those would be my favoured 4 choices. But I like all of these other options, and there are some players that haven't even made the list that I also do really like. But Foden, Kudus, Hwang, McTominay, Johnson, Kulusevski, Lo Celso. I'm not going to go through in tons of detail every single player, but I think with the next 2 fixtures, if Foden starts both of them, regardless of the fact his data hasn't been perfect and that City have been struggling, Luton away and Palace at home are two great fixtures. And post game week 18, if you can hold him through the blank, whether that be free hitting or benching him, the fixtures are also very good for Manchester City. So I think I really like Foden. My only concern with Foden is that I think Pep will probably try to mix it up a little bit or try something slightly different because whatever they're doing at the moment isn't working. That could be personnel switches. It could be a switch in formation. And therefore, I think City are a little bit unknown at the moment. But I like Foden. Kudus, I think, is great, but I just prefer Jared Bowen if I'm going to go for one of them. I think his minutes are slightly more secure, and I think he's got slightly greater goal threat as well. So I like Kudus. Bowen would be my favourite choice, but if you can't move to Bowen, Kudus is fine. My only concern with Kudus is the fact that he, again, is off to AFCON in Game Week 21, so it is a transfer that you're going to then need to reverse at some point and bring in someone else. I like Hwang. Hwang, similarly to Sterling, is on 4 yellows, and Hwang, similarly to Kudus, is off in Game Week 21, but obviously Hwang is off to the Asian Cup. So Hwang's next fixture, great. Nottingham Forest at home, really nice. His data's good. We think he's on penalties. There's a lot to like about him, but the 4 yellows isn't ideal, and being off to the Asian Cup isn't ideal either. So for those reasons, I think there are probably other places you could look now, and I don't think the fixtures post that Forest game are that great either. McTominay and Garnacho, I'm going to discuss a bit later in the video together, along with Lo Celso. So I'm not going to discuss those midfielders under the price of 5 million because I'm going to discuss them a little bit later in the video. But all three of them could offer value if you're looking really, really cheap, which just leaves Johnson and Kulusevski. I think they look arguably better than Heung-min Son at the moment. Maybe not from a goal threat perspective, but they're getting on the ball a lot. They're creating chances. And I do think there are returns for Johnson and Kulusevski coming up. And whilst Richarlison is now back, I still think Johnson and Kulusevski will start the majority of games for Spurs. So there are lots and lots of options. It's not just it has to be Palmer or Gordon, but I do think they are the obvious options for a reason. I think they both offer a lot of what we would want, and they are both still at a pretty cheap price. For me, just taking into account that he's one of the cheapest options on this list, on pens, good for minutes, and the fixtures are brilliant, I am leaning Palmer at the moment, but I do have my eye on a few of these other players. I would love to know down below, if you are selling Mbeumo this week or looking for a midfielder, who is currently top of the list for you. So guys, in this section, I wanted to talk to you about One Future Football, which is the world's first global virtual football league. So they've created their own league with AI teams, AI athletes, their own backstory. You can watch the highlights on YouTube. There are so many levels to it. And within this virtual league that they've created, they have their own fantasy game. So it's almost like they've created another Premier League, and within that, they've created their own FPL too. And this fantasy game, you have a free mode and a pro mode. And in the free mode, you can earn real money and kits if you do win or place in the top 3. And the deadline for the current round is at 8:30 p.m. UK tonight. So if you click on the link in the description, you can enter your team. I have been doing this now for about 2 months. I'm absolutely loving it. I wanted to show you my team selection for the free mode for this week. I've gone for these current 5 players. I'm not going to go through every player in detail, but my little tip to you, if you do go on to One Future Football and enter a free mode for the fantasy game for this upcoming round, again, 8:30 p.m. deadline, Sagara Biru, I think that he's due. He started the season very, very well. He's had a few off games, but I think Sagara Biru will go big in this round, and he is my prediction to be the top scorer. So if you want a little tip from me, someone that's been playing for a couple of months, I would probably go for him. So to be honest, the fantasy game is a very small part of One Future Football. You can also own shares within the club, so you can see that I currently own 300 total club credits from South London United, which is the team that I support within One Future Football. You can also train the players so that you can increase their stats in the way that they perform. So you have direct control over the results. You can also get daily bonuses, and you can see on this occasion, got 570 points, which allows me to train the players that I own within my club. And we're actually going to open a pack now to see if I can get any better players for the pro mode. So I've just purchased one of the squad packs. I'm not saying you do this straight away, but if you do want to buy a pack at some point, you can use the code RAPTOR10 for 10% off. I've just bought one with my own money and used my own code, which is pretty funny. So I'm now going to open all 11 players. I won't show you all of them. I'll just show you the highlights, and hopefully we're going to pack some really, really good players. Okay, guys, so immediately, and this is not rigged, we've packed Florian Grava, who in my opinion is the best player in the game. I believe he was the top scorer in the league last season, and he is arguably the best player to own in fantasy. Baba Fall as well is the starting goalkeeper for Niger. So I've literally packed 2 incredible players in the first 5, and I've still got 6 left to go. I'll be entirely honest, the 6 players after Florian Grava weren't as fantastic, but he is worth the pack alone. He's an amazing player to pack, and if you do get him, you put him in your teams and you captain him as well. So that is One Future Football, not just a fantasy game, but almost like an entire AI universe that they've created. You'll see me talking about it and playing it a lot more across the coming months, because I genuinely am loving it. If you do want to check it out, there is a link down below to play the fantasy game and also check it out for yourself. And if you do buy any kits or buy any player packs, use the code RAPTOR10 for 10% off. So with the fact that a lot of the defenders, pretty much all of the defenders in FPL stink at the moment, clean sheets aren't very common, even attacking returns, apart from for the very select few, which we'll discuss in the next section, aren't very common either. Lots of people saying maybe we just look at Man City defenders, because whilst they haven't kept that many clean sheets this season, they are a team that generally we can rely on, and this is often a spell where City go on a run, keep a lot of clean sheets and win a lot of games. So are there any Man City defenders that are worth considering? The short answer to that question is no, in my opinion at least. I'm just not very impressed, number one, with Man City this season, but also all of the assets that they have, because they just don't have very high upside. So what I've done here is I've listed all of the defenders that you can choose, minus, I think, Sergio Gomez, but these are the ones that you can choose from, all the way from Diaz at the most expensive at 5.5 million to Rico Lewis at 4.3. I've got their minutes per game, points per game, and non-penalty expected goal involvement per 90 to give you a bit of an idea about, are they nailed? How many points have they actually got, and what is their attacking threat like? And you can see that, firstly, do you know what? We'll look at that final column, the non-penalty expected goal involvement per 90. I couldn't even highlight some of these stats in green. That no one's got any attacking threat. Ake has the best attacking threat at 0.13 non-penalty expected goal involvement, which isn't overly high. And also Ake, I would argue, is the second most likely to be... He's the second least nailed out of all of the defenders. Rico Lewis, obviously not nailed at all, and he does play an advanced role sometimes, but that hasn't resulted in much attacking threat. So Ake and Lewis you can pretty much rule out due to the fact that they just aren't nailed on enough. Stones has the next least minutes, but Stones has obviously been injured. Very, very little attacking threat when he has played this season. I would argue that John Stones is up there as the most nailed, best Man City defender to own when he is fully fit. But we don't know how much he'll be eased back in, and we don't know if he'll re-aggravate that injury. So at the moment, you kind of have to rule out John Stones, which leaves the four most nailed defenders at the moment. And I say that very carefully because no one's ever nailed for Man City. But Diaz, Walker, Akanji, and Gvardiol are probably the four most nailed. And at the moment, I do think that Walker and Diaz would be the two that I'd be looking at the most. Neither of them have much attacking threat, but they seem to be playing most of the minutes available to their team this season. But you can see here, Diaz is averaging 2.46 points per game. That's shocking. Like, that's really... He wouldn't even hit 100 points based on that this season. Walker, who has played pretty much every minute available to Man City this season, is averaging 3.2 points per game. I mean, the highest here, like I said, is Ake at 3.64. Akanji may be worth considering with the second highest points per game. He also does have above 0.1 non-penalty expected goal involvement per 90. So a little bit of attacking threat. But I look at all of these options here. City would need to keep a hell of a lot of clean sheets to justify picking a City defender, because they just don't have much attacking threat at all. And because Haaland scores so many goals, and because the likes of Alvarez and Foden often chip in, they're not even particularly good for bonus points. So even when they keep the clean sheets, you're not even nailed on to get a bonus point from them. So they feel like 2 points or 6 points a lot of the time. And for me, as a result, I won't be considering Man City defenders. But for those of you that do, Walker looks the most nailed at the moment, but you never know how long that will last. And as I said in the first section, I do think that Pep will mix it up sooner rather than later. It may mean a change in system or a change in personnel, and Walker may be one of the ones that misses out. I think the most safe option long-term may well be Ruben Diaz, but just know that you have a very low ceiling there. Let me know down below if you are interested in any of the Man City defenders. So linking to that conversation around the Manchester City defenders, a lot of people are asking at the moment, is Big at the back? Is it the return of the premium defenders? So a couple of the sort of questions that I got was Big at the back an option with the good premium defenders finally delivering and cheap attackers now available? The likes of Palmer and Gordon, you do have the money often, especially if you don't have an Erling Haaland, a Salah or a Son, you do have the money to invest in your defence. So do we, for once, actually cheap out a little bit on the attack because there are so many good cheap options? And again, we'll discuss Garnacho, Lo Celso and McTominay in one of the future sections, and then actually invest the money in the defence. And then someone else said, does the lack of clean sheets actually make the premium defenders better options? Because you can't rely on the cheaper defenders for clean sheets. So attacking returns is really the only way you're going to get points from your defenders at the moment. To answer that last question, no. I think if I'm paying 6+ million, or in Trent's case, 8 million for a defender, it doesn't matter how many attacking returns they get. Unless they are literally getting 15, 20 attacking returns a season, they do also need clean sheets as well, because it helps for bonus points and it's extra returns too. So I do want clean sheets from my premium defenders. However, the likes of Porro have looked very good recently, but Trippier and Trent have looked fantastic for spells across the last kind of 4 to 8 game weeks. And Trent specifically over the last 4 has been exceptionally good, not only with his attacking data, but also the returns that he's got. Liverpool are the third best defence in the league this season for expected goals conceded. So, yeah, maybe Big at the Back is making a return. My only concern with Big at the Back is that I do think sooner rather than later, options always emerge in the attack, whether that be an Isak or a Wilson, whether that be everyone wanting Ollie Watkins back in, whether that be Martinelli and Ødegaard finally starting to look good with the Arsenal attack, or maybe Manchester United start to click and we want Bruno back in. At the moment, yes, you can get away with Palmer, Gordon, McTominay in your midfield. You can get away with Solanke up top and even Semenyo as a cheap option. There are lots of cheap attackers, but when some of those cheap attackers start to fall off, which often does happen, and some of the more expensive attackers start to look good, maybe once De Bruyne returns, we're interested there. It does get to a point where you often then want to sell those premium defenders to get the money back into the attack. I mean, I've got Kieran Trippier myself at the moment, and I often feel like that. Like, I don't like having that much money invested into my defense because there are always more attackers that we want. My other concern is more specifically around the players that you would be bringing in. So I love Porro, but he's only 5.3. So I'm not sure I would call Porro and Reece James big at the back. I think big at the back, we're really talking, is it worth having Trippier and Trent, or at least one of them? They both have issues attached with them. Trippier's fixtures are starting to improve soon, but Newcastle look knackered. I'm recording this after the Everton-Newcastle game. They look shattered, all of the players. Trippier made a couple of big mistakes because he looks so fatigued. And he's on 4 yellow cards too. So whilst the fixtures are going to improve soon, and whilst I still expect Newcastle to keep clean sheets, is this the time to be investing in him? We're on 4 yellows when they're looking really tired. And to be honest, Trippier is due a rest. I'm not convinced now is the time to go out and buy him, and especially not before Tottenham away. And then with Trent, I still think Trent will continue to deliver points, but most of Liverpool's best fixtures have now gone. And if you're not buying him this week for the Crystal Palace fixture, beyond that, the fixtures don't look fantastic for the next 4 or 5 for Liverpool. And we saw this with Trippier. Do you remember Trippier went on that run of scoring like 50 points in 4 game weeks, which is pretty much what Trent's just done. And then he come into some more difficult fixtures. And I think in 3 of those 4 game weeks following that spell, he blanked. And I'm not saying that Trent will blank every week, nor will Trippier, but will Trent deliver the amount of points he has in recent weeks? No, because I don't think the clean sheets are there, and he simply won't continue scoring every other game. So it's not that I think there are too many issues with big at the back, and if you had Trent and Trippier in your team, or at least one of them, I mean, I have Trippier right now, it's not a terrible decision, but I don't think now is the time that I'd be going out and buying Trent and Trippier. I feel like you've almost missed the boat with Trent in the recent weeks, and Trippier, he will still deliver points, but I wonder if you can still cover the clean sheet with Dubravka and Livramento and invest a little bit more money into the attack. So I don't think it's quite returning big at the back. I don't mind the idea of one premium and maybe one sort of Porro or James Price player. I'd love to know down below, how many premium defenders do you have? Do you have Trippier, Trent, both, neither? And are you looking to invest more money in your defense? So as I said, there were a lot of questions around the real budget mids, because maybe you are looking to get Trent into that defense, or maybe you're looking to do some other things with your team, maybe bring Haaland back in, and you just don't have the money to stretch to a Palmer, to a Gordon, all of these other players. People want to know, and I'm a Manchester United fan. People seem to think that I mention that a lot. It's to give context to what I'm about to tell you and the decisions that I make in FPL. But anyway, I am a Manchester United fan. I watch all of the games, and people wanted to know, are Garnacho and McTominay options? Which is something that I never thought I would read out in an FPL video. And is there anyone else that we should be considering? So you can see on your screen, you've got Garnacho, McTominay, and you've also got Lo Celso, who I think is another decent option. And you've also got Manchester United's fixtures over the upcoming spell. So just to discuss the fixtures first, they're not great, but they're not terrible. Bournemouth at home is a good fixture from an attacking perspective. I expect Bournemouth to probably score, but for the attackers, I think Manchester United will score too. Liverpool away is not a good fixture. West Ham away, again, I think not great from a defensive perspective, but going forward, I expect there to be goals. Aston Villa at home is a fine fixture. Villa aren't brilliant away from home, so I don't mind that. And then Forest away, okay. Tottenham at home, okay. So average fixtures. I don't think they're terrible. I don't think they're brilliant. Are Garnacho and McTominay options? I think the key thing for me is that you need this player to play. If you're relying on them every week, you need them to have good minutes. And that alone would lean me towards McTominay. Now, this is just an opinion. I can't predict the future. But I would predict that over the next 6 to 8 game weeks, McTominay will probably average around 80 to 85 minutes. I think he'll start pretty much every game, if not every game. And I don't think he's likely to come off early on too many of those games. Whereas Garnacho, I don't think will start every game. And the reason for that is at the moment, Garnacho is playing on the left. And in a couple of the recent games, when Rashford has played, he's actually been pushed out to the right. We obviously have Anthony on the right too, but I think sooner rather than later, maybe it won't be right now, Rashford will come back into the 11. And I think that Ten Hag, if he wants to get the best out of Rashford, which maybe Rashford doesn't deserve this, by the way, but if he wants to get the best out of Rashford, Rashford does need to be on the left. And I wonder if then Garnacho is either pushed out to the right or then dropped to the bench, because he does seem to love Antony. In my opinion, Garnacho should start every game. He is comfortably our best attacker at the moment alongside Bruno Fernandes. So he deserves to play in the position that he wants, but I don't think that will be the case every game. I think we'll see a combination of Rashford on the left, Garnacho on the right, maybe Garnacho on the left and Antony on the right, but then also we could see Garnacho drop out altogether with Rashford, Antony and Højlund or Martial playing. So yeah, I don't think Garnacho is going to start every game. And for that reason, despite the fact that he has looked good recently, I don't think he's an option because you need him to play pretty much every game. So if you are to choose one of Garnacho McTominay, I would go for Scott McSauce. I think he's been really good recently. And basically what Ten Hag's trying to do is play like dual eights. And I think he's spoken about that he wants to get McTominay closer to the goal. McTominay has spoken about the fact that he wants to score more goals. And I know just wanting to score isn't a great reason to bring a player in. But when the player and manager are both speaking about a very clear tactic to get you closer to the goal, I don't hate it as an option. So if I was to go for one of the Manchester United mids, I would favour McTominay longer term. I do just think it's worth considering Lo Celso, though, because he's now started 3 games in a row for Spurs. He's the only real creative outlet in that midfield in the absence of Maddison. And I do think he's a quality player. If he gets chances, I expect him to take them. And he will create chances for Son, Johnson and Kulusevski too. I would almost be more tempted to go for Lo Celso than either of the Manchester United players. Maybe that's a bit of pessimism from me. I just think from an FPL perspective, Lo Celso is probably more likely to get you returns than McTominay and Garnacho. So for me, if I was to rank the budget mids at the moment, it's Lo Celso, McTominay, Garnacho. All 3 of them could deliver you points, but I would also be extremely surprised if any of the players under 5 million deliver you consistent points. If you can, in any way, get to Palmer, Gordon, or any of the Hwang players like in and around that price tag, I think it's 100% worth spreading, even if it's for a -4 hit, to try and get to a slightly more expensive midfielder. So I'm recording this directly after the West Ham Spurs game finished, and I can't yet see a definitive update on Areola, but he did miss out in Game Week 15 due to a wrist injury. He wasn't in the squad. So let's assume that some people might need to replace him. If you didn't make the Dubravka move, maybe you're sat there with Areola and Turner, and therefore you do need to make a goalkeeper transfer. Is it still worth going for Dubravka? At the time of me recording this, he's still 4 million, but he may well be 4.1 by the time that you're watching this. You're obviously paying 0.2 million more than some other people have paid. And you also do have Raya and Sanchez there with Chelsea and Arsenal's fixtures improving. Is it worth paying the extra for those keepers? I'll be entirely honest, I still think it's worth going for Dubravka. Yes, it sucks paying 0.2 more than a lot of the players, the other managers in your mini leagues and the managers that you're competing against. But sometimes you just have to suck up your pride and just say, do you know what? He's still a great option at 4.1. And I do have a sneaky suspicion that Newcastle will prioritise other positions. Their squad is so thin, and they obviously have financial fair play to think about. I don't think they can afford to go out there and get a brilliant keeper. And even David De Gea is going to take up quite a large part of their wage structure and their wage budget. We know how much David De Gea demands, or at least how much he was on at Manchester United. So I've got a feeling they might just have to stick with Dubravka and then prioritise outfield position. So Dubravka could genuinely be in our teams until March or April. And at that point, he could be up at like 5 million. So I think you want to get on in him now. You'll still probably gain some price rises. And Newcastle are still a great defence. For all of the issues and worries that we have around their fatigue and the amount of games that they've had, I still expect clean sheets from them. And do I expect more from Arsenal and Chelsea over this spell? Maybe, especially with Chelsea's fixtures being good. But I do think there are other options from specifically Arsenal that you could go for. Chelsea's the only one where I'm like, do you know what? Sanchez might be worth it. Because, like I said, for Arsenal, you can go Gabriel, Saliba, Zinchenko. You could potentially take the punt on. Ben White, if he starts to look more nailed again, you could. But Gabriel and Saliba look pretty good. I think I would be fine owning them instead of David Raya. So I don't think you need to own David Raya. With Sanchez, I don't think any of the Chelsea defenders are fully nailed, and I don't think any of them are fantastic options. Reece James is Reece James, and then with Disasi, Colwill, and Badiashile, we just don't know how many games they will start. Thiago Silva looks pretty much as nailed as you can get, but I don't know that he'll play every game, and he is 5 million. So with Chelsea, if you do want defensive cover, Sanchez is probably the best route into that. Whereas with Newcastle, you will have Botman again very soon. You do have Fabian Schär. You also have Livramento, who's looked pretty good, and some of you may already own Kieran Trippier. So I feel like you can cover the Arsenal and Newcastle defences with outfield players, i.e. defenders. Whereas with Chelsea, I don't know that you can. So that would be the only thing that would make me think Sanchez could be an alternative option to Dubravka. But I just think for his price and knowing how good the Newcastle defence are, especially once they do get Botman back and maybe have a bit of a break over the Christmas period, going into the new year, assuming they don't sign another keeper, Dubravka could just be ridiculous value. Even up to about 5 million, he'd still probably be worth it. So I think I would still edge just at the moment Dubravka. But if you've already got Newcastle defensive cover, and maybe you do want to get in on the Chelsea fixtures, but you don't fancy any of the defenders, I actually don't mind Sanchez as an option. So just to finish off the video, I thought I'd go through my team as things stand and what I'm looking to do now in game week 16. I should just note that I actually started recording this video 5 minutes before the end of the Spurs-West Ham game, and I've now seen that there could be a potential injury to Heung-min Son, or at least the injury looks more serious. He was hobbling around towards the back end of the game, but I've now seen the videos after the game, and he looks in some serious pain. And of course, the deadline is very, very soon, and their next game is very, very soon. And if Heung-min Son is out, not only does that create another issue flag-wise in our team, but it does offer me a route back to Erling Haaland, and it may be that I actually decide to take that. However, I will obviously assess what happens on Friday. We'll decide that on the Saturday deadline stream, but I've actually had to re-record this section now because I at least want to acknowledge in this video that I've seen the fact that Heung-min Son could be injured, but it's nothing to rush on. We'll see what news comes out on Friday. We'll see what happens on Saturday. If we don't get anything definitive, I probably won't remove him, but if we do, I feel like that just offers me that route back to Haaland that I've probably got to take. I don't have to take it, but if I have that option, it kind of feels like I probably should. But that's something I'll decide. So this is the team as things stand. Before that Son worry, the plan was to take out Mbeumo for Palmer and Guéhi for Porro. So if I just go to the transfers right now, that was the plan, was Guéhi out because I don't really like my defence and I don't want him long term. Bring in Porro because I think he's been excellent. He was on all set pieces in that Spurs game. And whilst I don't think Spurs will keep many clean sheets, he's playing in such an attacking role that I feel like Porro is a fantastic option. And then Mbeumo has to go out because he's injured long term, probably, at least for the next few weeks. And Palmer was my favourite option due to how cheap he was. So that will still be the plan, at the moment anyway, if Son is fine. Palmer and Porro in for Mbeumo and Guéhi, and that leaves me about 1.3, 1.4 million in the bank, depending on price changes. So I'm really happy with that. If Son is out, however, let's just have a look now if it is possible. So let's say I still want to do the Mbeumo to Palmer move. I can do that. And let's say I then want to do Heung-min Son, or do I want to take out one of my forwards? Let's say I want to do then Heung-min Son all the way down. Let's go to a 3-4-3. Let's just say, I don't know, something like Baptiste, who's the cheapest sort of player you can get. I know that would then leave me a blank spot in game week 18, but I feel like I could probably get Baptiste back up in the coming weeks. Or this might edge me back to a free hit, who knows. But then I would have 7.1. So I would have the money to bring Haaland back in that Alvarez spot. Because I don't think I want to take out Darwin before this fixture. And I want to keep Ollie Watkins ahead of blank game week 18. And the fact that he's playing so well. So that would probably be roughly what I would do if Heung-min Son's out. It would allow me to remove Mbeumo, still get Palmer in, get Haaland in for Alvarez, and then switch to a 3-4-3. The only concern with this is it involves taking a -4 hit, and it involves not fixing my defence. And I do think my defence is a bit of an issue at the moment. But I suppose Pedro Porro had Newcastle anyway in game week 16. So it wasn't a massive help to my team to bring him in. But now I would struggle to get him in for Guéhi because I wouldn't have the money in the bank. There are a lot of things going around, but I wanted to re-record this section because, like I said, I finished editing, finished everything, went over to Twitter and saw all of the videos going around. Unfortunately, Son looks like he's in a lot of pain. So let's assess what happens on Friday. If Son is fine, it will be Guéhi and Mbeumo to Porro and Palmer. If Son is not fine, I have the option to move to Haaland. The other option I have, if I just reverse this, and then this will be the final thing for the video, is if I bring in Palmer for Mbeumo with one transfer, I could then just take out Son for whoever I want. It could still be a Gordon. It could be that I go for like Jared Bowen if I want to. I could go to another Spurs attacker, and I could keep the same plan, but rather than bringing in a defender, I would just bring in a second midfielder. Or I could just keep Son, right? Because if we go back to my team very quickly, I know I'm just talking a lot of nonsense at the moment, but if we go back to my team, I have Martinelli. So I could put Martinelli in for Heung-min Son and just remove Mbeumo. So even if Son's out, doesn't mean I remove him. Even if I do remove him, doesn't mean I move back to Haaland. But it would offer me so many different options and a bit of a headache, to be honest, because I was finally settled on Palmer and Porro in. And I was like, do you know what? I like those transfers. So let's see what happens. Let's see what information we get. But for the time being, that's the rough plan, and do make sure to tune into the deadline stream, because based on all of the information that we're getting and the possible transfer plans, it could be a classic. So guys, there you have it. That is my Game Week 16 deadline decisions video. Hopefully this was helpful for you. And if it was, please do smash that like button and make sure to subscribe as well. We are trying to hit 110,000 subscribers by the end of 2023, which is optimistic, but I do believe we can do it. And as I said at the start of the video, make sure to check out One Future Football. There is a link down below to the free fantasy game. And as long as you enter by 8:30 p.m. UK time tonight, you will be entered for the upcoming round and have the opportunity to earn money, some cool kits, and also just enjoy the game as well. Until next time, thank you very much for watching. Cheers. Bye-bye.